Janeway, Spock's beard, Lorca's acting very weird. Captain Pike, Sisko's wife, Klingons and the afterlife. Boimler, Tendy's dog, Ransom is very hard. Spore Drive, Black Alert, Giorgio has gone berserk. Vija, Batleth, Edward is an idiot. Spock is dead, Worf is wed, Chekhov's wearing red. Data's cat, Kempak's that, Q has had enough of that. Beam me up, make it so, everybody let's go. We talk about the series. You can join us live by picking up your phone now. We talk about the series. We're coming to you on your streaming services now. We talk about the series. Comics, books, and games, we go beyond the show now. We talk about the series. Come and join us as we sit and chat and we go on and on and on and on.
Well, good evening, Trekkies and Trekkers around the globe. It is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. Welcome to Trek Talking, episode 627. Wow. Unbelievable. 627. I'm your most excellent host, Uncle Jim. And before we go too far, I'd like to go down the line and introduce you to my awesome Treksperts. And we'll start out with Eric. Eric is out in Portland. How you doing tonight, Eric?
I'm doing just great. How you doing?
Yeah, we were just talking with Charles about palm trees in his backyard, and I was like totally amazed because I don't have palm trees in my backyard. So
I don't know if it's like it is in LA, but I know that palm trees are not native to LA and that they were brought in to fancify the joint. I'm not sure if the same is true in Las Vegas or not.
Yeah, it's
well,
same.
we found out that scorpions live in palm trees, and that Charles has to be careful because there's scorpions around his backyard. So we did not know that. So see, it's not just fun; it's educational. So, anyways. And sticking out in Portland, we're going to swing over and say hello to Paul. He's our resident toy expert. How you doing tonight, Paul?
Oh, I'm great.
And last week, we had a really good show. We talked to Ben Robinson. And yeah, if you guys missed that show, you want to go back and check it out. It was a lot of fun. Ben teased some stuff to us that was sitting on his desk, but couldn't show us. So we'll just have to wait and see. And also hanging out in Portland is our very own miracle worker, David. How you doing tonight, David?
Doing pretty miraculous.
Miracle. And then we're going to swing out to Las Vegas, where Charles has palm trees and scorpions hanging out. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. A little wind blowing in the Studio B, but hanging in there. At least the rain's staying away for now. No scorpions in the
palm trees?
backyard. No scorpions in the backyard, but I know other places in the city that do worry about scorpions.
Wow. I'll take my pine trees, thank you. So, guys, you can head over to trektalkin.com. You can click on the blue talkback mic in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can leave us a message and tell Eric how awesome his hat is if you'd like, or tell David you love his tribble, or tell a story to Charles about his scorpions and palm trees. Or you can tell Paul about the latest toy that you picked up at the latest convention. We'd love to hear from you guys. Just click on the blue talkback mic and leave us a message. Tell us anything you want, and we will play it on the next podcast. You guys, while you're there, you can click on the Patreon link, which you'll find there. And you can go over to Patreon, and for $2 a month, you can actually see the video of what we're recording right now. All of our podcasts are now recorded not only in audio but in video format as well. And our very own David, he's our miracle worker, and he works up these awesome slideshows and pictures, which you're obviously not seeing right now because you're listening to us on radio. But if you head over to Patreon for only $2 a month, you can watch all these awesome videos. So please do that if you have a chance. Tonight's show, Comic Corner is back, baby! Yeah! It's been a long time since we did Comic Corner, but it's time to resurrect it. And tonight we're going to be talking about Section 31 one-shot issue, and we're going to be talking about Lower Decks #1. Both great comics, and we're going to get into them in just a little while. We also have our fan shout-outs. That's our segment where we thank our fans all around the globe, just like you. So you want to check that out. We also have some Poll questions this week. Commodore April has to make a very difficult choice in Star Trek the Animated Series, and Riker has a real moral dilemma that he has to face. So I wonder what those could be. You'll have to check it out on our Star Trek poll questions to find out. We also have our Star Trek birthdays. You can find out what Star Trek actor you share a Star Trek birthday with. We also have Star Trek news, what's going around on the Star Trek universe. We have Shatner says, "What?" And another Star Trek actress wins an Oscar. And we're not talking about Michelle Yeoh, it's somebody different. And will Captain Janeway return to live action Star Trek? I wonder. You're going to have to listen to Star Trek News to find out. When you go over to our Facebook page, you'll see at the top a pinned post asking where you're listening from. Tell us where you're listening from, leave some emojis, and then listen to Trek Talk and fan shoutouts to find out if your name is mentioned. Eric, you want to get us started with our fan shoutouts?
Absolutely. We're going to spin that globe and head over to New Zealand to start out with and say hello and thank you so much for listening to Rich Hosking, who said hello to us from that amazing part of the world. Thanks, Rich, for saying hello. I hope to visit your continent one of these days. It looks really amazing down there. Also saying hello this week to Ashley Hedges, who's in Milton Keynes in the UK. We have tons and tons of supporters just across the pond, and I think the podcast considers them friends. And thank you, Ashley, for being part of that community. We really appreciate your support. Also saying hello this week to Rui Goncalves, who's saying hello to us from Lisboa, Lisbon, Portugal. One of those places that has some really stunningly amazing architecture if you start digging into it. In particular, from the 90s and early 2000s, there's some really cool stuff in there. So Rui, thank you so much for saying hello to us from that amazing place in the world. And last but not least on my list, I'm saying hello and kapla this week to Selma Lopez Geronimo, who's saying hello to us from Rio de Janeiro, one of those places that we often see in movies because it has that amazing statue, but lots of other cool stuff going on there in Brazil. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. And Charles, I'd like to hand this shout out megaphone over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Let's start off with a warm welcome to Randy Holmes Coates, who's in Florida. Oh, trying to get where it's warm. Yes. Warm welcome to Paul Ekenberg from Plano, Texas. Welcome, Paul. And welcome to Lakota Spoolman from right here in Las Vegas. Name doesn't sound familiar, but you should look us up. Especially look up the USS Las Vegas. And a warm welcome to Lincoln William Stetler from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Lincoln. And let's toss his microphone over to David.
Thank you, Charles. I would like to say a warm welcome and thank you to Joe. I'm probably going to say this wrong, but Bunaro, I think is how you pronounce it, from Roseburg, Oregon. And another warm welcome to Rita Hernandez from Michigan. And guess what, guys? We got somebody from Portland, Oregon. Yes, and that is Jerry Taylor. I would like to give you a warm welcome and thank you for listening to us. And last on my list is Chris Braun Matter from Ohio, USA. Thank you all for listening, and I'm going to send this microphone over to Paul.
Thanks, David. Why don't we say howdy to some fans and Star Trek enthusiasts from other parts of the globe outside of North and South America. First of all, I'd like to say hello to our fan Liz Green Larson from the highly unlikely named town of Middelfart, Denmark. I am praying that is a typo, but you never know. Where are you from? I'm from Middelfart, so I'll have to look into that and see if
Not
that's
the front fart, not the
see
back
if
fart,
that's
but the middle
true.
fart.
I know that sometimes the scripts we read off here are rather quickly put together, so one never knows what one will be reading. But perhaps that's true. We'll have to check in.
Turns out it's a real town. I just
It
looked it up.
really is middle fart.
Middle
Okay.
fart.
So is there a early fart and later fart?
Potentially. It
It
looks like
seems
they have
that
a beautiful bridge.
It seems that there should be if there's a middle fart, but there you go. So, wow, the things you learn from this podcast are just astonishing. A different continent, but wonderful to go there. Whangarei, New Zealand, where our friend Kane Davis is saying howdy from. Great to know we have fans down in that hemisphere as well. Johanna Grzelak is saying hello from Zebnica, Poland, with their flag proudly displayed. Hello, Johanna. It's great to hear from you. And then just down the road in Argo, Switzerland, it's Saffron CQ. Hello, Saffron, and thanks for being a Star Trek fan. Uncle Jim, what about you?
Well, I'm going to come back here to the United States and say hello and thank you to Evelyn D'Onofrio, who's listening to us in North Carolina and flying the American flag very proudly. I don't know about that these days, but welcome to the show, Evelyn. I also want to say thank you to Susan Kingston Yo, who's listening to us in the Big Apple, New York City. Represent. Thank you so much, Susan. We also want to say hello and thank you to Lily Bennett, who's listening to us in Norfolk, Virginia. And last but not least on my list, we want to send out a hearty Qapla' and live long and prosper to James Angers, who's listening to us in Maine. And now it is time for Star Trek polls, which means we have to play the Poland song.
Poland, 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 you know we like knowing what you thought about the show, and we try to share your opinions with all of our minions out there because they listen worldwide. So tell us just what you think, and together we will all drink Kanar and Romulan ale tonight.
God, I just love that theme song. Yeah, I do. So every week on our Facebook page, I try to come up with an interesting question to ask you guys to see what you, the fans, think, have their fingers on the pulse of Star Trek. Sometimes they're good polls, sometimes they're not. So, Eric, what do our minions have to say this week?
Oh man, we are starting out with a poll from one of the best unsung series out there in the animated series episode, The Counterclock Incident. Commodore April, that's right, that April, facing retirement, is given the choice of becoming young again and forgetting everything he knows, or retiring with his wife. Do you agree with his decision to not remain young? And 80% of our poll responders said yes, April made the right decision. And only 20% thought that he should have taken that fountain of youth and gotten young instead. I will say I'm 100% on board with April because I think growing old with your wife is one of the coolest things that you can do in life. So I agree with his decision.
Yeah, this is, if I remember correctly, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but because I haven't seen this movie in ages, but I believe this was the same question that Ron Howard asked in Cocoon, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Yeah,
In Cocoon, they found those cocoons in the pool that made them get younger, but when they got younger, they didn't know the things that they knew when they were older. Am I right or wrong? It's been a long time,
Well,
but
I don't know if they lost knowledge. I can't. It has been a while for me too, but I do think that the crux of this question is that there is knowledge gained and experience gained as one gets older, and to simply erase that is maybe a dubious proposition. I don't know.
yeah, I agree. I agree with the 80% of our, or, I'm sorry, 88% of our minions that said he made the right choice in growing old and retiring with his wife rather than getting young and forgetting everything. So I'm with our minions. How about you, Paul?
Oh, Paul, you're muted, buddy.
I know a solution to that. Let's see. What would be the point of being young if you have nothing of value to think about? So it's just one of, I don't know. It just seems it's one of those, choices that just seems a little pointless because it's like, of course, everyone. I mean, I can't imagine. I'd love to talk to the person who, oh, I'd like to stay young but have no thoughts in my head and no memories of anything. And I mean, what were you thinking? But everyone's different, clearly. So I don't know. But yeah, I would be in the 80% group because it's like, it's youth is really overrated, from my opinion, right? I wouldn't go back to my youth for any freaking amount of money you could name.
All right.
Nope, that's a big
Nope.
nope.
Nope. All right. How about you, Charles? Are you with our minions or against our minions?
I agree with our minions. Do I really want to sit there? It's like, yeah, being young would be nice, not have achy knees anymore. But to give up my past wouldn't be worth it. Too many good memories in my past. Too much
Yeah.
of
And
growing up with
now,
sci-fi. Too much of growing up with sci-fi, and all of a sudden forgetting all the sci-fi I've seen after we watch it over.
yeah, but then you get to relive it for the first time again.
Yes, but then I don't have the memories of sitting there watching Next Generation with my mom.
True. True. And now we get to come to David, who already is young. So I guess it's a different question for David.
I just saved so I look young, but technically I'm not all that young. I have to agree with the 80% folk because I just realized what that question, how it was read, and I was just thinking, why would you want to grow young again and forget everything you want without your wife being there? So it's like, no, that's not a thing for me.
All right. So
So
our
totally,
Truckspurts,
yeah, it's a red
Truckspurts are
decision.
with the minions on this one. All right. Unanimous. All right, Eric, what's our next one?
All right, our next one is in episode 18 of the second season of Next Generation, Up the Long Ladder. Riker kills a clone of himself with no real moral dilemma. Do you agree with his decision? And 88% of our responders said yes, they agree with Riker's decision to kill his clone, and 12% said no. And I would guess that at least 25% of that 12% is me. Because despite the fact that Mr. Tim Russ himself says that it was correct to kill Neelix, I still am not so sure myself. Different episode, but same concept.
Yeah, well, the reason why I put this one out there is because, you know, is the clone of Riker a life form? Does the clone of Riker have a right to exist independently of Riker? And the fact that Riker just pulled out his phaser and just killed him without any remorse or really anything, he just killed him, cold-blooded murder. So I guess I'm with the 12% too. Wow.
I mean,
So
I think you have to go back to. I mean, Star Trek, luckily, has answered this question for us, right? If you go back to the episode "Measure of a Man," where sentience is defined by Data and Riker during Data's trial, and if a being comes into being and is sentient, and they're just offed because they happen to be a copy of somebody else, is that a moral decision? I think Measure of a Man taught us that it's not.
yeah, and I think that if I remember this episode correctly, it's been a long time too. I think Riker was pissed off because he was cloned illegally, or well, not illegally, but they kidnapped him and then cloned him without his knowledge or approval. So he felt that he had a right to just kill the clone because he never gave it permission to exist in the first place, if I remember the episode correctly. And I just think that murder is murder, period.
I mean, that
So,
to me presumes some sort of ownership over the clone. I understand that you do have ownership over your own DNA, and I think as time goes by and technology increases, these sorts of questions are going to come up more often. I actually just saw a movie that sort of explores this a little bit too. I can't. Gosh, it's in the movie theater right now, and I can't think of the name. It's something 17. I can't remember the guy's name, but basically he gets killed off over and over and over again.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, It's like, what are the moral implications of just cloning somebody's DNA and making another person that's just like them? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this brings up the
Mickey,
question of
Mickey 17. That's what it is.
cloning yourself so that you can harvest your organs for yourself.
Yeah,
You know,
that was also in an episode of Star Trek.
that was in another episode. Yeah, exactly. See, they're all connected.
Yeah.
So, lot to unpack here. What about you, Paul? If you found out that there was another Paul running around out there, would you just go and bump him off?
It's called time management, brother. I would have so much more free time in my schedule because I would work out a relationship with my clone, so that there were things I wanted to do and there were things I did not want to do, and I would convince him to. Otherwise, more importantly, though, up the long ladder, is this that really kind of painful to sit through, like kind of Irish Brigadoon episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where there's a
Yep,
lot of
that's the
really
one.
there's a lot of really questionable Irish accents being put around there, John Luke
Yep,
Picard. I mean,
yep,
I
that's
don't
it.
know if I could ever sit through that episode again. It was incredibly painful. I mean, it was like bad, bad community theater. I'm just like, if the clone's got one of those Irish accents, I say off him. But if he doesn't, then we'll talk. But I mean, that was just like, I mean, it's one of those episodes. Remember the days of syndication when like Next Gen was on 5 days a week, right? And you'd be, oh, hopefully it's a good one. Hopefully it's a good one, right? It'll be like, oh, cool, it's conspiracy or whatever, right? And then you come on, and this one comes on, you're like, oh, guess I'm going to the bar. So it's I can't handle it, man. Bad episode.
It was a bad episode, but it still had a moral question.
They all do. All these episodes, every Star Trek has a moral question. Most of them, like 99%, right? But
So are you with our minions that he made the right choice or not?
I think he probably, it's a short-sighted choice, right? Murder's stupid. It just shows that you're like, you don't have enough brain power to figure out a better solution. So yeah, I would say it was a
Yeah.
stupid choice. So I guess I'll answer B. You can take some of the percentages away from, the higher number.
All right. How about you, Charles? So far, our Trek experts are against the minions. We all fall in the 12% category. What about you?
Okay. I actually remember back in a college course for ethics, we actually did a group project talking about cloning. And this was back in the era when Dolly was being cloned. And the ethics of cloning animals to duplicate them. I'm also thinking back in this episode. Part of what's happening with the society was they had access to this colony who I think was losing where they lived and had to be transported up the ship. And they were like, but we want to just sit there and clone and keep within our own community. We don't want to sit there and expand our genetic code. And they were thinking, well, we make the solution by sitting there and cloning these crew members from the Enterprise so we can sit there and put good stock into our genetic code without somebody's permission. Now, I think maybe with permission, they might be able to do something. But when you sit there and capture these people and clone them without even getting permission, I could see where Riker was getting mad. And the thing is, they're being told it's like, well, yes, but you've got this Irish stock that needs a place to stay and is ready to sit there and add good genetic code to your society. And I think it
So
was just
Charles,
push. Go ahead, Eric.
sorry, I was just going to ask you a question. So based on the class that you took where you talked about this sort of stuff, so let's say that Riker was cloned, but he never found out that he was cloned. Does that change the ethics of it at all?
I think there's still an ethical issue of cloning somebody without their position, their permission, their knowledge. Look at how much look at how much issues we had with Thomas Riker. That
Who
was
they
a
allowed
that
to
was a
live.
that was a conflict. Yes, he was
Yeah.
the right to live, but he also sat there, joined the Maquis, and really had some problems, and used Riker to try to push his way through a situation that he shouldn't have been in. So I'm going to kind of follow with the minions on this one. That I think he did it due to the fact of, do other people have right to sit there and clone me? Sure, we can clone ourselves, maybe, and have maybe the ability to do something, to be able to have a relationship. But in that case, I don't think they even had a relationship would have had a relationship with those clones. They were just genetic stock to sit there and keep, because you inbreed too often, you start bringing problems to the genetic code.
What if you create not to belabor this, but like,
I-
I love the idea of talking about someday, what if you create a digital copy? Is that different from a physical copy? There's all sorts of like layers of this conversation that I think are really interesting.
Okay, I
Well, we don't
recommend
have to dig into it now, but
no.
Yeah,
I know. There's a book out there, and I can't remember the full title of it, but I like the subtitle. We Are Bob, and it goes into that. It's an interesting conversation. Interesting because there's drift and change between clones.
Yeah, so you're with the Trek experts on this one.
No, I'm with the minions on this one.
You're with the minions. All right. Well,
I'm with
David,
the
how about you? Are
minions.
you a Trek expert? Are you a Trek expert or a minion this week?
So honestly, I have completely forgotten about this episode. I didn't realize Riker was cloned before, before Riker. Not Riker, Thomas. So when I read this, I was like, wait, he killed off Thomas? I don't remember that. But I don't know. I honestly think that cloning is a very strange topic. I mean, when it comes to an actual life form, sure, there might be some ethical stuff in there. But when it comes to just growing parts, like what if somebody needed a new arm, or a liver, or any kind of organ? So I don't know. That's completely separate right there, of course. But to me, I think I kind of agree with the experts here that if he found out without his consent of the people cloning him, I think he had the right to go ahead and kill the clone. Because, like what Eric said, if you are in charge of your DNA, that clone is also a part of you as well. So technically, is it the same person?
it
It's
has
kind of
its
an
own sentience.
Yeah, I know, but it's just you have
That's
the right to your own DNA though. So I don't know. It's an interesting
if
topic, but I would have to say I'm actually with the track choice on this one. So it's a no.
All right. So there you have it. There's our poll questions for this week, and I'm glad that we had a conversation about it, because that's the whole purpose of these polls, is to think about things that maybe you wouldn't think about otherwise,
And
Like,
if you haven't seen it, Jim, you got to watch Similitude, Season 3, Episode 10 of Star Trek Enterprise, which deals with this exact situation.
I think we had a poll question about, is that the one where the doctor lets the whole race die? No.
This is the one where Trip clones a body, or somebody clones a body for Trip so that they can use its organs to help Trip live.
Yeah, he becomes
okay.
like a walking lab, basically.
Wow, so Star Trek has this cloning issue quite frequently, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, I think that Charles is right. The whole purpose of this was there was 5 or 6 clones, and they couldn't reproduce anymore, and they actually had to go up to the ship and have sex with the Irish women, and they didn't want to do it. So that's why they stole Riker and they stole these people and whatnot. it's a cheesy episode, but I like the moral question about it. So, all right, guys, that wraps up our Star Trek polls. Head over to our Facebook page and make sure you answer this week's polls. All right, you guys miss Lower Deck?
Yes.
I know I do. A lot of people miss Lower Decks. Well, luckily for us, there's a Lower Decks comic book. And yeah, so we're going to talk about issue number 1. I think they just put out issue number 5, Charles?
Yes.
Yeah, so we are a couple of issues behind, but not that far behind. So who wants to get us started on Lower Decks issue number 1? Paul, you want to start us on this one?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Paul will get us
What
started
are we recapping, or how do you want to handle it?
any way that you want to. It's
Okay.
it's a freelance deal.
Yeah. I would say this is a pretty decent issue for the most part. I mean, I think it's interesting because it's like if you're in a comic shop trying to track this down, they had done a whole earlier series of Lower Decks comics, and so there is another issue 1 out there that will cause some confusion for folks that was done earlier in their run, and so they're kind of rebooting the whole title, if you will, right? I think kind of in tandem with right around the same time period that the show ended, right? And I just want to grab some notes here, guys, so bear with me. But basically, things kind of start off with like what I would almost equate with like a montage, right? Of like about 4 or 5 one-page kind of jokey episodes where it seems like something bad is going to happen, right? And that there's an issue. These missions keep happening that seem like they'll be perilous and exciting, but nothing ever really comes of them. And everything just resolves itself kind of organically and quickly, right? So it's like no big whoop, right? There you go. And so as a result of that, Mariner is kind of pining for something to happen. She's pining away for a real adventure to occur, and she hopes that will be the case. I'm looking at my issue here right now to make sure I'm on tap with everything. So, and then to me, it's like one of the funniest bits on here. And I think, first of all, for me, kudos to Ryan North who wrote this, because the characters all speak very much in the same style that we're used to them talking on the show, right? So it's done with a lot of fealty and affection, which is great. But they stumble across this area of space that they call the Delta Triangle. It's like a Bermuda Triangle in space, right? And this may sound a little familiar to folks, right, who are fans of previous iterations of Star Trek. And then you realize about midway through this section that what they're doing is they're kind of having fun and mining some content from one of the original episodes of the animated series, right? That they even refer to by name, Time Trap, right? I believe it was, right, from the first season. And it's actually pretty funny because they get a hold of like Kirk's captain's log, right? And they're totally riffing on the fact that everyone's commenting on it, like why is he leaning into the camera and doing his log so close up, right? So they're having fun with all of the kind of commenting, breaking the walls there to talk about like the style in which they were done, and kind of like in the animated style of 1973, right? Where it's like, wait a minute, it's his captain's log where he's talking to the camera, but all of a sudden there's this external footage from way out in space showing ships, and where would that come from? And they're trying to like rationalize how all this is. And I thought that was really fun in that fourth wall breaking kind of way, because they're having a lot of amusing points of that. And they realize this ship is like an earlier precursor of the Constitution class ships, right? One that Mariner recognizes as the name escapes me.
USS Bonaventure.
Bonaventure, yeah, the USS
Bonaventure.
or the
Sorry.
Bonaventure,
Yeah.
whole different, but it's like from like the early styles of pre-Constitution class or whatever. I know a lot of people are into the different classes of ships or whatever, so they're like, okay, we don't understand how it got out of this time trap kind of deal and what happened, and we're going to go over there in our environmental suits and we're going to figure out what's going on. And they do, and they go over there, and not a lot happens. Things seem to keep happening without great explanations once they're in there, and then all of a sudden the ship just They're like, how did this ship get out of the time trap? And how did these systems come on? And why are other systems not coming on? And then at the end of the, I think David had a panel up there from it, right? At the very end of the issue, right, all of a sudden, people seem to just like be bleeping out of existence, and the ship just goes to warp, and Ransom sitting there going, what the hell happened? What's going on? Right. So I found the first half of this issue more satisfying than the second half, really. But I mean, it really shouldn't be denigrated for that, because as the issue ends, right, it says to be continued. So it's just, it's a monthly title. You don't really get the resolution of the story because they're not standalone titles, they're connected through here. So you're gonna have to get issue 2 to really find out. But I thought the whole bit commenting on animated series Kirk was hilarious. I thought that was really, really fun and enjoyable. Something I did not think that worked. I think they've done this in previous issues. Visual aids, I think, are helpful. At the bottom of just about every page for the first half of the comic, there's some wacky banter that gets put on there, kind of like a little editorial kind of commentary, almost like they're trying to do those little asides like Stan Lee used to do in Marvel, right? Like, hey, editor's perspective on this thing here. And those really fell flat. I don't think that they serve much purpose at all. I was trying to, squeeze in some extra jokes, but they weren't funny and they didn't really serve much purpose. And so I found them really distracting. And every time I went down to read one, I felt that it, kind of sucked the momentum out of my experience with the issue. So a good start, I think. I'm curious to see where it goes in issue 2, which I've not read yet. Some of these are piling up. Yeah, there's people just winking out of existence in front of Ransom there. Kind of weird to me. As soon as they get over to the Bonaventure, right, all of a sudden, Mariner basically has nothing to do. She's been the main character in the first half of the issue, complaining about, oh, I wish I had a real adventure. I wish I had a real adventure, right? Bemoaning all that. But then once they're over on the Bonaventure and the adventure starts, I don't think she has 2 lines of dialogue. And she's basically kind of, really relegated to, background status. So I'll be curious what happens with her. And I'm assuming that she'll move more to the forefront of the story to have an adventure when that happens. There's a bit of a red herring involving the holodeck, but I don't know if that's going to pay off or not. So we'll wait and see. But that's what I thought. So kind of fun. I mean, it's nice to be able to have, if folks really like Lower Decks, and the show's gone now, presumably, unless somebody picks it up somewhere else. It's kind of nice that our good friends at IDW, who've been cranking out Star Trek for a quarter century, are finding a way to keep going and still provide more Lower Decks content for folks, because it plays like an episode, it reads like an episode for the most part, and there's a lot of the same fun tweaking existing parts of the franchise. So that's me.
I absolutely agree, Paul. To me, this felt like I was reading an episode. Just like the previous comic books that we talked about. Dracula, yes. And they mentioned Dracula in this particular comic as well. That was the original, I think it was a 3-part comic. Was it, Eric? I
I
think.
think that's right. It might have been 4. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
It was either 3 or 4.
It's 3.
Yeah.
It was a short
It's
run.
3.
3? Okay. And we get to see holographic Dracula. And I like the fact that they reference that in this book. So you can go back and check that out if you want to know what they're talking about. I want to see holographic Dracula hanging out with holographic Frankenstein. They mention it in the comic book, but we didn't actually get to ever see it. But yeah, I agree with Paul. This really felt like I was watching an episode. It was phenomenal. Lower Decks, I think, is perfect for the comic book medium. And I think that these writers know their characters and they catch them perfect. I mean, there's this whole thing at the beginning with Tahana where they have some type of galactic measles outbreak or some type of virus, and she's doing her effing thing and F this and F that and in complete Tahana style, and she cures the whole virus in a matter of what, 3 seconds?
20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Actually.
like so. I mean, I thought that was great because that's so Tahana. Unlike Paul, though, I did enjoy the little I don't know what the hell you call them, the things on the bottom of the page from the writers. I enjoyed that as a little side thing, and I really like the fact that they referenced TOS and they actually talked about the Enterprise being mounted on top of the Klingon ship and the Gorn and the Klingons and stuff like that. I really enjoyed it. So I personally can't recommend this issue enough. I thought the artwork was great. I thought the characterizations, they felt like their characters. Um, Tendy didn't really have a lot to do in this one, and Rutherford didn't have a lot really to do in this one. But like Paul said, this is only part one of part two, and this is going to be a monthly, ongoing thing. So who knows if they're even going to wrap this up in the next issue? It might go on for another issue. Who knows? But I personally highly recommend it. I thought it was great. The artwork was great. The characterizations were great, and I recommend it. So how about you, Charles?
Okay, actually looking at my comic, I love how we get this 20 minutes of things, and I kind of break the wall a bit and said, and at the bottom, starring Tiana as herself. And she kind of successfully clears off this virus. And then I love the episodes where it's like, the Cerritos encounter. We go for 2 whole cells. A watchtower. A couple of cells. And we do this I thought 3 times. And I like how we kind of go, it's like, oh, we're going to have this adventure. And nothing happens. And that's where we kind of get married. It's like, okay, nothing's going on. This is boring. Nothing really occurs during this. They think that they're going to have this big occurrence. They walk on the bridge, and it's like, oh, gee, there's a TOS reference. And it's like, and we see just a screen. It's like, oh, we're in a Christmas tree. It's like, oh, yeah, some higher being is playing around with another creature again. It's like, okay, go to your room. It's like, no, we're do something. No, we're not going to do anything. They think maybe they think maybe the holodeck is where they can sit there and maybe get something going on. And the captain lets them know, oh, there's something you want to see. Oh, you're trying to get our hopes up again, aren't you? Yeah, I thought you might want adventure. And I love how Mariner comes in and recognizes the ship. And I believe it was something like an old Warp 4 ship, but the people
2.5
recognized it. Warp 5. But I think it
2.5
was
on the old
2.5.
scale.
But they were talking about the fact that it was after Enterprise, but before the Constitution came out, which I thought was an interesting ship. It said, "Oh, that's an ugly ship." It's like, it's an interesting looking ship. But definitely, I just thought I liked the idea of bringing this odd ship in and going over to investigate it and how it came to be, and worked it from there. I like what they do with this episode. I actually have caught up through issue 4, but I like what they're done with the series so far. Looking forward to cracking open 5. I've had an issue with Amazon. It's like, okay, Paul says issue 5's out. It's like, why didn't I get it? It's like, okay, my subscription didn't work for some reason. Okay, download it. Get it in my collection so I can read it. But another good episode. We're glad to see IDW's keeping going.
Now, isn't the isn't the Bonaventure the ship that crashed in Return of the Archons?
No,
Uh,
it was the starship Archon in
Yeah.
Return of the Archons, right? I mean, that's why they were called the Archons.
Because I swear the Bonaventure was mentioned on a TOS episode, but we never saw the ship. Was that the Patterns of Force? Was that the ship?
I
I
thought
don't
it was
know.
mentioned in a TAS episode for some reason.
Yeah, it sounds familiar to me, but I don't know.
It was in a, well, Paul mentioned the TAS episode that it was in. Yeah.
Yeah, I know I've heard it. All right, David, what do you think?
I enjoyed it. I'm not much of a comic enthusiast as the rest of my transfers here, but I actually enjoyed it. I laughed. I cried. No, just kidding. Okay, but it was really fun. I enjoyed it. It took me a while to try and figure out because I don't really read comics, and so I tried to figure out like which line bubble came first. I'm like trying to figure out like, okay, so who's talking first here? And so then I realized you have to go from like a regular book, left to right. So it was just kind of like trying to follow the diagrams and everything. So it was a little interesting, but I I I laughed out loud the moment I believe it was either Marino or Ta'ana who mentioned something about the ship having eyes, like you can see right here.
Yeah, that was
I never
Mariner
even
talking
noticed
about the
that.
fact that she had a model of it when she was a kid.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that was pretty funny. And then of course, like Paul referenced already, the Bermuda Triangle, which is referenced here as the Delta Triangle. So I thought that was kind of funny. And then of course, yeah, I agree with you guys. The style of the writing, the word they use to like they did in the show was really spot on. I really enjoyed reading, and I just kept hearing in my head what the voices sounded like as I would read the bubbles and stuff. So it was just kind of it was a pretty interesting comic. And the next comic that we talk about, though, I'll tell you about that when it comes along. But other than that, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was really fun. You guys touched on a lot of key points here, and yeah, I would recommend it. I recommend it to myself.
All right. Well, Eric, you got to hear what all our Trek experts had to say, and you get to bring up the caboose with the final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, not too much more to add. I will say that for me, Ryan North is one of my favorite comic book writers. And I mention this, of course, every time we read one of his comics, but he's the genius behind Squirrel Girl, my personal favorite superhero and series of comics. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking that happens in those comics, and there's a lot of fourth wall breaking that happens as Paul already mentioned in this particular issue. So I like that, and I think the way that I tend to read these comics is I sort of read them through without reading the little subtexts underneath at the bottom of the page, and then the second time I read it through, I check those out. It is kind of another layer of jokes layered on top of other things. So I don't mind those. I do think they can be a little bit distracting from the story if you're not used to that kind of style of writing. So yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that you guys said. I thought the story moved really well. I thought the art was really good. It's compelling. It's funny. I laughed out loud several times. One of the things that IDW does these days in a few of their comics, which I wish they would realize that like some people in their 50s and 60s are reading these comics, is that they put the very first page, they always do this summary, and the summary is in like 2-point font. Like I have to practically pull out my magnifying glass to even read what's going on, and it makes the graphics of it all look really cool. I think this is the world of 4K invading our comic books, right? Like if you have a 72-inch television in front of you, you can have really tiny writing and little tiny details in the background and you can still see them, but when I'm reading a comic that's this big, I'm sorry, I can't read 2-point font. So I kind of wish that they would update that just a little bit. But maybe the kids love it. I don't know. So I totally dug this issue. So many great jokes. I love that they did the animated series stuff in the animated series style. And the jokes that various people rip out, whether it's Billups or Mariner or anybody, are almost always landed to me. There's the one that I think Paul mentioned something about when he's when they're talking about the Kirk logs. There's this scene where our favorite Vulcan says something like, "I do not understand where they got this footage from." So that these comics have a tendency to say the things that I think we're all thinking. And this issue in particular, I think brings in like 4 or 5 different kind of like, well, that was kind of weird in Star Trek moments, and sort of like canonizes them in different ways. So I don't know. I appreciate the knowledge of Ryan North as the writer to kind of like be able to bring enough. I assume he has a team of people who's also helping him kind of bring this information in and help the jokes land. So anyway, I thought it was a fantastic issue. I just really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read more.
All right, so that wraps up our review of Lower Decks issue number 1. And Eric, since you brought up the caboose, you want to be the engine for the Section 31 one-shot?
Ooh, I can. I feel like this is one of Paul's special skills, though. It's like,
Okay, well,
Paul, do you want to give us a summary
All right, Paul
of
can,
it?
I can, yeah, if you
Okay.
want.
I
Yeah, I don't
feel
want to
like
be
you're particularly good at this. So
I don't like
All
to be a
right.
monopolizer.
Yeah.
But
Then
you know,
I rescind your offer, Eric, and we'll send it over to Paul.
cool. All right. So Section 31. All right, and I got to be honest. I was really, I mean, I get every single Star Trek comic that there is in my subscription box at the comic shop. Right. I'm like, if it has Star Trek or Star Wars on it, just subscribe me. Right. I want all of it. But I know when this came out, I was like, oh God. Because I really was not a fan of like the Section 31 movie, right? I was like, oh man, this is going to be, and it felt thick to me. And I'm like, this is going to be a big ass story I'm not going to enjoy, right? And I'm like, ugh. So not looking forward to it. And whoa, breaking news. I enjoyed this so much more than I was expecting to. For the main reason is I was really concerned that it was going to involve a lot of the main story of the Section 31 movie with those characters like, Snarf and Douche or whatever the hell their names were, right? Or wacky band of Galaxy of the Guardian miscreants, right? And there was no it was all the whole issue, aside from a little button thing at the beginning and the end, right? Was this is all going back, flashback to that Terran Empire recruit training that we had those flashbacks for in the Section 31 movie, right? Which was the best part of the Section 31 movie, right? All that stuff, right? Very flashback, and that's 90% of the content, if not more, in this here. And I thought that was really interesting, right? I mean, it's derivative, right? Because the whole Terran Empire thing basically is they go through this thing called the winnowing, right? Which is basically, kind of separating the chaff from the wheat of your cadet class. Who's got the chops to be a cold-blooded, merciless killer and endure enough to become, you have to be the biggest bastard ever in order to be willing to be emperor. Sort of like the way they do it in like the Republican Party, I would say, except they use a little bit more sharp knives. But there you go. So similar kind of thing there. Very Hunger Games influenced, right? And I don't think anybody would deny that, right? So just have to go through all these different trials of the winnowing involving various, attacking your classmates thing in order to determine who is the emperor. And it's a lot like what we got in the origin story from the movie because they're the same character, right? It was the yin yang deal between Giorgio and San, right? Who's sort of her kindred person. Two of us and one, perfectly timed, David. Two but one, right? The whole thing. It's basically kind of part of the movie rendered as comic book form, but it's a little bit more in depth because we get to see this really mean instructor, right? The proctor that they have who kills one of Giorgio's friendly classmates right in front of her and blood splashes on her face, right? So you got to love that, right? So that was kind of cool, right? So just the fact that it was all focused on that whole thing, even though it was like a little recycled from what you see in the movie, I think this might have done well if it was published before the Section 31 movie came out, friends. I think this seems like not what I would call the best marketing synergy here because this seems sort of tired and
Didn't it feel like it was delayed or something? Like the timing was all off on when it
yeah,
came out.
yeah. Because if you read this before, you'd be like, "Oh, sweet, cool, getting behind the scenes about Giorgio," and you're not burdened down by Douche or any of those other characters, right? That are part of the modern timeline, that were not very memorable for me. But so much more enjoyable than I thought it would be. And then there's like the reason the issue feels so heavy is the last like 9 or 10 pages is this giant excessive amount of like gallery portraits, right? Which IDW loves to give you those, right? So there's just tons of extra pages of stuff to check out there. But better than I thought it would be, even though it is really a recap from the movie. Terran Empire training sounds pretty graphic and fairly brutal, and a lot of sharp knives and stuff like that. So I had fun with it. I was just glad that it focused where it did, and not on the stuff with the current crop of freewheeling miscreants that the Section 31 movie did. I just wanted to point out, seeing that screen right there where the red vertical bars are, that was really done well. I want to point that out because I like that, because David was talking about trying to understand sometimes how comics, what's going on. Whenever you see the red bar, that's Georgiou's internal thoughts, right? That she is thinking, and it's not just like regular dialogue, right? That'd be more like the regular balloon that you'd see in a panel, right? But whenever you see that red bar, which I thought was really rendered nice. It's a cool graphic touch. I thought that really distinguished that. And it helps you know that, okay, that's internal Georgiou whenever she's going. So I thought that was really well done. So kudos to, I think she's a regular contributor for the IDW Trek, but Alyssa Wong, I'm didn't have time to look up her name, but I'm sure I've seen her associated with other titles before, but I thought she did a good job on here, and I thought the dialogue was good. I thought that anytime you give me a panel like this, right, where I've got like somebody that's got like knife blood splashed across their face, I'm like, okay, thank you for not dumbing this down and infantilizing it, right? I mean, you're showing me how gory it is and how hardcore it is in the Terran Empire. Props. Don't water down the vicious Georgiou's lifestyle like I think the Section 31 movie kind of did, right? I mean, they kind of sanded off a lot of her rough edges, I felt. So it's cool that they did more like pulp 80s movie style here to make her a little bit more of a, the environment she's in. Oh, now go home and poison your family, that kind of thing, right? That was really cool. So her background story to me was a lot more interesting than what they did with her in the movie. But I still enjoyed the comic, and I'm stunned that I'm saying that. So I'm kind of, I did not expect of me admitting that it was a good read, but it was a good read, and I had fun. So I would say if you like at all the Section 31 comic, I would pick this up. The movie, I would pick this up.
All right. So, Eric, since
Yeah.
you were the caboose last time, we'll let you jump in here and continue on.
Yeah, right on. So I agree that I think Alyssa Wong is a fantastic writer. She has a lot of experience in comics. She's worked for Marvel, she's worked for DC, she's done several Star Wars comics, she's done Deadpool. So she's, not somebody who's new to the comic game. Um, so I appreciate her skill and her ability to kind of convey a lot of information in very few words. That being said, I prefer comics that have a lot of words. I don't know. I like it to take 15, 20 minutes for me to read a 32-page comic. And this one just had a lot of pictures, a lot of really short lines. And so it was a very quick read. I mean, despite the fact that it was kind of this like double-sized one shot, $6, um, you know, it 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 read relatively quickly. Um, I think that I also have some confusion here on the whole concept of the Terran Emperor. So, what I was led to believe before Section 31 was that the way one becomes emperor is one kills the previous emperor. And we've seen that happen a few different times. We saw it in Mirror Mirror. We saw it in Star Trek Enterprise when Hoshi Sato becomes emperor. Um, and so now from the Section 31 movie, and I agree with Paul entirely, this comic should have come out weeks before the movie. I think it would have actually helped breed interest, much in the same way the Countdown comics. Remember when those came out? There was the Star Trek 2009 Countdown comic that came out before the movie came out, and that bred interest for it. There was the Star Trek Picard Countdown comic that came out before Picard came out. That bred interest for it. This one coming out afterwards feels like just like somebody didn't meet their deadlines or something. So it was a little weird to kind of go back and and get the story after you already, because it literally ends, I think, on the last page with like, see more in the Section 31 movie. And I'm like, yeah, I already saw the Section 31 movie. So I don't know, that timing was a little bit off for me. I also totally agree with Paul though on the whole like graphic representation of who's talking or what sort of speech is going on, whether that's their internal thoughts or whatnot. I think IDW does that quite a bit. I've seen that in some other comics too. I think both Marvel and DC are doing that these days, but it really helps clue you into what's going on in the comic. And I really appreciate that as a kind of like mechanism of reading. Um, so yes, I thought the art was pretty decent. I mean, it didn't totally knock my socks off, but I thought it was really good. But I will say that when you look at a lot of these IDW comics, they do appear to include a lot of diversity on their teams. There's a lot of people who identify as various genders. There's a lot of racial diversity when you look up who the writers and the letters and all these people are. So I think it's cool that they're bringing lots of different voices to the table and giving them all a chance to tell these great Star Trek stories. In the end, I think what I've learned about myself is that I have a very limited interest in mirror universe stories. I just like cruelty just doesn't interest me as a topic. And so, great, Terran Empire is brutal. Great, people are getting killed all the time. Great, you got to kill some more people to move up. Like, there are no moral plays going on here. There's no like, questions that don't have answers. It's just kind of like people being mean to each other. So I don't know. For me, I think there's nothing wrong with this comic. I just think that the writers and the artists and everything probably did the best with the topic that they were given. I'm not sure it's a topic that totally interests me at a deeper level. So, yeah, good comic. If they put out a second one, of course I would buy it because I'm like Paul. I'm saying if it's Star Trek, put it in the box. But you know, I read it twice, and I'm not sure I'm going to go back and read this again. To tell you the truth. So, yeah, that's my opinion.
Well, I'm kind of with you guys. I thought that I was disappointed when I read this because I thought they intentionally held it back. And so I was thinking that it was more than it was because why did they hold it back? And after I read it, I was with you guys. I was like, yeah, why did they hold it back? Because there's nothing in this that really would spoil anything that was in the movie. Nothing at all. So why hold it back? I think it would have when like you said, Eric, I think it would have enhanced people wanting to see the movie if they had put it out early. So maybe you're right. Maybe it was a deadline or something.
Or,
I
for all
don't
we
know.
know, guys, what could have happened is, right, this thing was slated for scheduling in March, right? And it could just be that, like, because this happens sometimes, right? You have a publishing is a little bit more mechanical, right, in a lot of ways, right? Maybe they had a fixed date, and Paramount Plus, because they're just such brain trusts over there, maybe they decided, let's run this thing early. Isn't that kind of didn't it sort of jump earlier than we expected? Like in January, right? It was, that's when it aired. So maybe they changed their date and it's like you can't, the publishing just couldn't keep up. So that could be.
Yeah, that's an
Yeah,
interesting kind of like the
that's
other direction, right? It was actually the show that came out early, not the comic that came out
Yeah,
late.
because
Yeah.
sometimes if they feel like, okay, this is our window and we're going to get creamed if we hold it till February, because the publishing date on the inset page says February, right? Even though it just came out, right? And so I think they have a hard time moving that stuff around as opposed to like, with TV and it's digital. If they say, okay, if we, our best window to get viewers is now. If we wait to February, we're going to run up against all these other new shows that are coming out. We should just do it now. And they just sort of hastily promote it. So who knows, man? But yeah, I mean, I really want to, echo what you said. I mean, it's just how much mean-spirited stuff can you get into, right? It's kind of like, the first Starship Troopers, right? It's like, oh wow, they're fighting bugs, and all that stuff like that. But do you really want to see like umpteen told stories of gunning bugs to death? It's just like, give me something to think about.
Well, I think what this comic did for me also is it kind of made me realize how much Michelle Yeoh carries a scene or a movie or an episode. Like, and you know, we don't get her acting skills in the comic. We don't even really get her character for like her adult character for more than a page or two in this comic. And so, you know, I was one who was like, hey, you know what? I thought I was going to totally hate Section 31. I didn't totally hate it. I watched it and I thought it was pretty good, like 90s action movie, you know? But that was because Michelle Yeoh starred in it, I think. And you don't get any of that with the comic. So yeah. Anyway,
Well, for me, I thought, if you guys remember, we hear this name San mentioned in Discovery when Carl tests Giorgio before he sends her back, and now we know where he sent her. But at the time that we watched Discovery, we didn't know where he sent her, and we didn't know what her deepest regret was. She mentions San, and we see a puddle of blood, but that's as far as they went on Discovery with it before it ended. So this particular comic book actually wraps up that story that was introduced on Discovery, I think, very nicely. And I think it also goes in to help with her redemption arc because we get to see how ruthless she was and how she was being groomed to be ruthless, so that when she hooks up with Burnham and the Discovery crew, and you know, she saves Saru, and she redeems herself, and Carl says, yes, you've been redeemed, and he saves her. The comic book just fills in a lot of that backstory. So,
well,
you know,
but an interesting thing though that they do in this comic that's I think plugs into what we were just saying was that they say in this comic that the candidates, the 15 candidates or whatever that are chosen for many reasons, and one of those reasons is their ability to be cruel. And so I had a question about that because it sounds like to me in the Terran Empire that not everybody's a bearded Spock. Like there are some people who are just trying to live their lives, just trying to eke out an existence on a planet somewhere, and that cruelty is actually it's a nurture thing. It's not a nature thing, right? But they say that these candidates were chosen, and one of those criteria were that they had the ability or the propensity to be cruel. So that sounds like a nature thing to me. Like people are just born cruel. Um, so I still have some like I feel like the Section 31 movie and this comic have muddied my understanding of the Terran Empire just a little bit by trying to flesh it out. So it feels weird to me. Like know more or no less by knowing more right now.
Yeah, it's like her parents, right? They're just like blacksmiths and
These people,
farmers and whatnot. They're
these
just
people
chilling,
doing their
right?
thing.
But you
Yeah.
see that like leadership, or rather the
Ambition.
they're all about the only way to maintain power is through fear.
Yeah.
Thanks, Elon. But it's just like they're all like weaselly bastards, in control, and you can tell that they, if they think if they're not feared. And Spock says that in the original Mirror Mirror, right? Terror will keep, is the only way to maintain order, right? Otherwise, everyone will rebel up against you and insist on equality. So it's interesting. So
Mhm.
I think I like mirror stories because I find so many unfortunate parallels of them manifesting in reality, right?
Yeah.
So it's a good cautionary. But yeah, but hopefully if they do more of these, I mean, it would be interesting to see somebody write a little bit more literate, measured assessment of this, go post Georgia, see where we go then. So I don't know.
Mhm.
all right. Well, Charles, what did you think about the Section 31 comic book?
Well, I think you did a true example of how dark and cruel the Terran Empire is. We start right off in a classroom and we realize the fact that, okay, you're not here to be friends, you're here to be competitors. And that was rather quick of showing, okay, let's show that we can sacrifice your classmates. Who's the thing of the TV show? Who's the weakest link? And usually taken out. Who is the weakest link? And even backstabbing classmates who sit there. Oh, she's being disloyal. It's like, okay, fine. Then I challenge you for challenging my loyalty. And I think really proves the fact that you've got to be careful. You want to watch your back in the Terran Empire. But we learned a little bit of this connection with San, which we didn't. We got a little vagueness in the movie. I think we got a little more detail about their connection here. So I think it was a good little mini backstory to what we had in it. As you talk about updates, because I run my subscription through Amazon and their Comicology, I will get dates to when issues are supposed to come out. And I do note that sometimes IDW runs into production issues, and issues are postponed a week, 2 weeks, a month. And so it may be how quickly they can get an issue printed, put together. So if they can't get that fully digitally put together and ready for production, they'll pause it they'll backdate it for a couple weeks later. And so issues do sometimes come out later than you think they will. So I think it was a combination of Paramount pushing it out fast and IDW running into a time frame that they couldn't match. Overall, I thought it was an interesting comic, dark comic, but you got definitely an interesting view of the Terran Empire. Because I know we normally get the Terran Empire view from the Trek view, and this was not a Trek view. This was more of a look at civilization and what the future Emperor has to go through.
So, Charles, do you think that the winnowing situation here, do you think that in this case, and they don't describe this in the Section 31 movie either, but like, has an emperor died and they need to replace that emperor, and that's why the winnowing's happening? So it's either like the emperor dies and they got to find a new emperor, or you go stab that old emperor and then you take over. Are those the two ways that the Terran Empire kind of, replaces their leadership?
From what we have seen, yes. But I think the killing off the Emperor is something we saw from Enterprise. We didn't really say how Spock kind of came his position in the series. I know he became it. We're not sure exactly how he did it, whether he killed somebody off or took over.
Is that true? Who's seen Mirror Mirror more recently? Like, do you guys remember how the heck Spock actually became Emperor?
I don't think they explain it. I don't think they explain it.
Well,
I
he
think
had the
just
Tantalus
Spock.
field, so he was able to just poof and make people disappear with the Tantalus field.
But he didn't take over quite then. I think we saw the takeover more in the comics.
Well, he doesn't take over till the end of the episode, I think. Isn't that the end of Mirror
No,
Mirror?
I don't think he took over that. I think they put the idea in his head to take over, but I don't think he took over at that point. I think he was more like, I have to think about this.
Good Prime Universe Kirk plants the seed in Spock's mind. He basically gives him that kind of like, he goes, one man can make a difference.
Yeah.
Think about that. And I think Mirror Spock's thing was always like, I can do more, manipulate more, and actually have more power by not being the figurehead. Right? That's the impression I got. He's too smart to be the leader. Right? I mean, the leaders often, I'm just looking around contemporary America for an example.
Full of bravado.
the leader's often not the brightest person because he's more likely, for one thing, to be the most immediate target. So a smart person is in the secondary position and often controls things if the leader is puppet. And I think that's where Mira Spock's at. So that's what I always got from that. So fun stuff, fun to consider, more interesting than this. So,
Well, I think
All right.
our belief to what happened to Spock was not based on the episode, but the IDW comic Mirror Mirror.
Yeah, you're totally right. There was a lot
Yeah.
more fleshing out of that character in the comics. Yeah.
Yes. But definitely IDWs showing their positive work on Star Trek. And looking forward to seeing what else they're doing. In fact, trying to keep up with Intrepid and Star Trek, which I'm not keeping up with right now, and I've got to start doing it this summer. And I think
All
David's
right.
the
Well,
caboose.
David's the caboose this time around. So you heard what everybody else thought. What do you think, David?
Yeah, so a couple of things. In a universe where people kill people off, how does society exist? I mean, what the heck? They gotta have some sort of canon, right?
I figure every single couple must have like 6 kids because they know they're gonna lose like 4 or 5 of them.
Also, in this mirror universe reality, I've always thought that the reason the Terran Empire existed was because they tried to make humans strong and aliens were not supposed to be around. How the heck did Spock get into position? Or in that case, how did T'Pol or any of the other aliens from the other mirror universes get into position? I mean, are they just like slaves, I guess, or servitude in a way?
Well, they don't describe it for Spock and Mirror Mirror, but they do. But to Paul and the Vulcans were absolutely like not not at the same level as
Yeah,
Terrans in
I do remember
Enterprise.
that.
Yeah.
But still, I just thought for an empire who's pro-human, I just thought that was just kind of a strange thing. I guess they were running out of manpower, I guess, the for their ships or something, so they had to have aliens or something. I don't know. I just thought it was a little weird. But anyways, the other thing too, I want to get back to the actual comic book here because Paul mentioned something about the red strip. Well, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was also a blue strip of somebody else thinking, apparently. And that was found on page 18. And apparently, I guess that's supposed to be Shan talking or something. So yeah, it's kind of like toward the top. I should have actually copied it, but I just put it into the screen. But yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
that's
blue
San's
strip.
internal dialogue, that light blue color. I see it.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. So in other words, yeah, I just thought the Terran Empire for this particular comic book, like I said, I don't really read comic books, and I'm not a fan of any kind of violence or horror for that matter, and it's been kind of sickening me a little bit. I'll probably get more used to it the more I read other comics, but it's just the fact that this particular one, I do agree with you guys. They should have probably had this out way before the Section 31 came out because as I was putting the slideshow together, I was trying to figure out which photo to actually put in there, and I actually went with the last one where the other emperor told them to go poison their family. But I was like, now I kind of regret not putting it in there. But that would probably been the perfect explanation of what the Section 31 movie was all about. The continuation. But I did like this particular comic where it was basically a memory, kind of like going through what happened, and I actually kind of like that. And my biggest question is, as we will come across eventually once it gets back to the beginning, who's the shaded figure? They never showed his face. The
I
one
think
that
that's
said is this
our
street occupied?
I think that's our Botany Bay homie. What's his
Oh, from
name?
Section
Alec
31.
or Al, something with an A. Yeah. That was my
Yeah.
guess who that is, but you're right. They didn't actually specifically say. But isn't that the first person that she interacts with in the section? I don't know. Jim saw it like 5 times. Isn't that the first person she interacts with in the movie?
Yeah, that's Alex Shar.
Alec. Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Oh, and did he actually say that line? Is this seat taken? Or was that just part of the comic?
I think that was part of the comic.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I agree with a lot what you guys are saying, but this particular book kind of like, I almost didn't finish reading it because it kind of was a little too heavy for me. But other than that, eh, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it to the point where my stomach could handle, but I had to eat right away to prevent myself from throwing up.
No moldy
But,
cheese, I hope.
well, that might have helped, but
No comics and donuts for you.
No.
no heavy comics, I guess. But I'm not that queasy. I just, I really don't condone violence at all, and I would hate to be inside the mirror universe. However, that did bring me to another point. When you guys were talking about the mirror universes between the different series, is there a mirror universe that actually has a mirror universe on top of it? Another type of alternate universe?
That's Inception, dude.
Yeah.
That's called the Kelvin timeline.
Okay. But
Well.
overall, I enjoyed it. So that's just my take on it.
All right. Well, that wraps up our Section 31 conversation. Go and check it out at your local comic book shop. And now it's time for our Star Trek birthdays. You guys ready for some birthdays? Where's the birthday song? There it is.
That was not a Klingon song.
You know, Worf says that every week. He's not a merry man, but we love him anyways. All right, guys, we actually have a lot more deaths to celebrate than we have of births. So we're going to turn this thing right over to Eric so he can get started remembering those members of our Star Trek family who, sadly enough, are no longer with us. So, Eric, take it away.
Yeah, Jim, I will move quickly through these because there are quite a few this week. Our first remembrance is for actor Davis Roberts from Mobile, Alabama. He's the actor who portrayed Dr. Ozaba in the original series' 3rd season episode, The Empath. Throughout his long career, Roberts appeared in over 30 feature films, including In a Lonely Place, The Chase, Westworld from 1973, which I know several of our Trexperts enjoy, Willie Dynamite, Demon Seed, and he actually appeared along with LeVar Burton in 1977's Roots as well. He also appeared in many television series such as I Dream of Jeannie, Mission Impossible, Gunsmoke, Sanford and Son, and All in the Family. Davis Roberts lost back in 1993 at the age of 76 years old. Happy birthday to him. Happy birthday as well to Patty Edwards. She's the actress who played the role of Anya in the Next Generation 2nd season episode, The Dauphine. She began her acting career in the early 1960s and continued on until almost the week that she died. She was well known as a voice actress on a number of Disney animated movies, including The Little Mermaid, Hercules, and the voice of Gozar in the hit movie Ghostbusters from 1984. Also in several other movies like Corvette Summer, Halloween 3, To Be or Not to Be, Blue City, and myriad others, and had a few guest appearances on the comedy series Night Court along the way, working with John Larroquette. So happy birthday to Patty Edwards, lost back in 1999. Happy birthday as well to Mickey Morton, the actor who appeared on the original series playing Drill Thrall Klug in the 2nd season episode, The Gamesters of Triskelion. Other television credits include guest appearances on all the shows from back in the 60s, Gunsmoke, I Dream of Jeannie, Fantasy Island, etc. In 1978, he appeared in the infamous Star Wars Holiday Special as a Wookiee named Mala, alongside Ralph Marr. He also co-starred with fellow TOS guest stars Frank Gorshin and William Schallert in the 1979 TV special Legends of the Superheroes, and LeVar Burton and Kirkwood Smith in the 1985 TV movie The Midnight Hour. little bit of confluence of Star Trek talent there on a weird TV movie. Happy birthday to Mickey Morton. Happy birthday as well to Booth Coleman, the actor who played Pinot in the Voyager 4th season episode Nemesis. Coleman had been acting in film and television since the 1950s, amassing well over 100 credits. One of his earliest film roles was as a reporter in the movie Them from 1954. He also appeared in The Beast of Budapest from 1958. But most importantly, and I think recognizably, had a recurring role as Dr. Zaius on the Planet of the Apes, co-starring, of course, Roddy McDowall and Mark Leonard, and also appeared in the 1977 television movie In the Glitter Palace. Happy birthday to Booth Coleman, lost at 91 years old back in 2014. Happy birthday as well to Angelique Pettyjohn, born Dorothy Lee Perrins, portrayed Shanna in the TOS second season episode The Gamesters of Triskelion. She was initially noted for her work in a number of B movies and TV shows and was considered at one time for the role of Nova in the original Planet of the Apes film. A couple of Planet of the Apes remembrances this week. She starred in a number of adult and B movies throughout the 70s. And at a Star Trek convention circuit gathered steam, bolstered by the release of Star Trek the Motion Picture, she found herself in increasingly high demand as a guest of honor. And since then, she vigorously worked the circuit, and she would show up at Star Trek conventions all over the place, particularly throughout the 80s, with her last appearance being on the circuit in 1989. Happy birthday to Angelique Pettyjohn. Happy birthday as well to Catherine Kate Woodville. She's the English actress who played Natira in the TOS third season episode For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. Fantastic episode name, by the way. Initially credited as Catherine Woodville, she was quite prolific during the 1960s and 70s, appearing in a number of movies and guest stars in several television series, including many of the ones from that time: Mission Impossible, Black Gun, and the Kung Fu series. The murder of her character in the first episode of The Avengers was the driving force of the first year and the reason for the title. She was born in the UK and eventually lost her life in Portland, Oregon here in 2013 at the age of 75 years old. Happy birthday to Kate Woodville. Happy birthday as well to Peter Paul Fix. He's the American actor who played Dr. Mark Piper, the original Doctor in the second series pilot of the TOS series Where No Man Has Gone Before. Fix is one of only 2 Star Trek actors verified as a veteran of the First World War, where he served in the U.S. Navy. His birth of 13 March 1901 makes him the earliest born actor of the 20th century. We had a couple from the 1800s. Following the Navy, Fix became an incredibly busy character who got his start in local productions around his New York home, and by the 1920s he had moved to Hollywood and performed in the first of almost 350 movie and television appearances. 350! Ugh. In the 1930s, he became friends with John Wayne, coaching him on acting, and eventually appearing in about 25 of John Wayne's films. He is most well known as Micah Torrance from the ABC series The Rifleman, appearing for the show's entire run. Peter Paul Fix, I loved your little suitcase full of drinks that you brought forth for our captain. Happy birthday to you. You were lost to us back in 1983 at the age of 82 years old. Happy birthday as well to Grant Woods. Grant Woods, lost at the young age of 36 years old, was the actor who played Kelowitz in the TOS first season episode The Galileo 7. He was also in Arena and This Side of Paradise. Woods was born Earl Grant Titsworth in Vim, Colorado, and following his tour of duty in the U.S. Navy, he went to Hollywood, where he worked as a stuntman, occasionally under the name of Grant Lockwood. So using that name, Grant Lockwood, Woods not only performed stunts, but also acted on television programs. So if you see any of those three names, Grant Woods, Earl Grant Titsworth, or Grant Lockwood, it's all the same person. His only film appearance came in the 1966 spy comedy, The Silencers, and unfortunately he lost his life in a motorcycle accident in 1968, which is why that age of loss is so young. Happy birthday to Grant Woods. Happy birthday as well to Frank Emmons Overton, the actor who played Elias Sandoval in the TOS first season episode This Side of Paradise. He is among the few guest star actors in the original series to have been listed with the credits as a special guest star. Overton had a reoccurring role on the television World War II series 12 O'Clock High, as well as making guest appearances on a variety of television programs, mostly westerns back in the day. He also appeared in a handful of feature films, his most notable role probably as Sheriff Heck Tate in the acclaimed 1962 adaptation of To Kill a Mockingbird. Happy birthday to Frank Emmons Overton, lost back in 1967. And last but not least on our list, a more contemporary loss, unfortunately, lost way too young at the age of 27 years old due to a terrible, terrible accident. Anton Viktorovich Yelchin. He's a Russian-born actor from Southern California who played Pavel Chekhov in Star Trek 2009, Star Trek Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond. His parents, of course, were Russian Jews, and he was born in Leningrad in Russia, the second largest city of the Soviet Union at the time. When he was only 6 months old, he and his parents emigrated to the United States, but because of their Jewish heritage, they received refugee status due to the long-term anti-Semitic policies of the Soviet state. Walter Koenig was also of Soviet Jewish parentage, interestingly, although he himself was not born in the USSR, and they were from Lithuania rather than Russia proper. He had an active film and television career starting in 2000 at the age of 11 years old until his death in 2016. And in 2009, he, of course, was part of the Star Trek ensemble, which received a Washington, D.C. Area Film Critics Association Award nomination in the category of Best Ensemble, and won a Boston Society of Film Critics Award in the category of Best Ensemble Cast. Yelchin enjoyed playing the guitar, and privately, behind the scenes, not many people know, he actually battled cystic fibrosis, regularly undergoing treatments at the University of Southern California's Keck Hospital. A foundation to help actors with disabilities like him was set up in 2017, and a year later, following a $1 million donation, the Adult Cystic Fibrosis Center at Keck Hospital was renamed the Anton Yelchin Cystic Fibrosis Clinic. We really, really miss him, and it's absolutely certain that he would have gone so many places and had a very prolific career had it not been for his terrible accident. Anton Viktorovich Yelchin lost back in 2016 at 27 years old. Happy birthday to him. And that, everybody, does it for our remembrances this week. So I would like to pass this birthday flaming candle off to Charles.
Thank you, Eric. I only got a couple of them on my list. Happy birthday to Jonathan Del Arco. You're a Ukrainian-born actor who played Hugh in TNG's 5th and 7th season episodes Iborg and Descent Part 2. He reprised the role in Picard Season 1's episode The End of the Beginning, The Impossible Box, and The Penthe. He also appeared as Phantom in Voyager's 7th season episode The Void. Glad to see we got him back in Picard. Happy birthday to Mark Metcalf, who played the Herodian medic in Star Trek Voyager's 4th season episode The Killing Game and The Killing Game Part 2. And I'm going to pass this candle over to Paul.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, who we got playing Getting Older this week? That magical board game that we're all involved in. First of all, let's say happy birthday to Donna Murphy, who's actually a Tony Award-winning stage actress, but also works in film and television, and who we are saluting from her role in Star Trek Insurrection, part of the next-gen motion picture franchise, but done plenty of other good work as well, including turns in Spider-Man 2 and Tangled. So very prolific work there. Always great to have somebody with good stage chops doing your work for you. A little extra value, I think, that they bring to the table. So happy birthday, Donna Murphy. Happy birthday also to the memorable Nancy Kovac, who caught everyone's attention in the original series second season episode A Private Little War. Very prolific actress back in the day. She was in it was a picture, it used to be all the time on TV, called Marooned, about a spacecraft that was in distress. She was in that. We talked about The Silencers earlier. That was kind of another spy picture from that era. Get Smart, Batman, as you see there, and then the 1963 Jason and the Argonauts. I know that Nancy Kovac was in that as well, but I would say that in A Private Little War, she kind of pushed the boundaries there, what you could maybe get away with in terms of, I mean, some of those takes were, I'm trying to say a lot without saying anything, but
Yes. Well done.
impressionable young boy making your way through the 8th grade, and you encounter this episode, you may find yourself irreparably changed. So I was, it was. She definitely went for it, and I would say that there was not a lot of inhibition that I saw in her performance, which was striking. So memorable, Nancy Kovac. I mean, and just it's a underrated episode. I think it's a cool episode. It's one of those ones that has a lot of political relevance in terms of how we deal with other cultures and arming people and playing against our enemies, and just so underrated episode, I would say. Definitely good, as a lot of those second season episodes are. So good stuff. Happy birthday, Nancy Kovac. Happy birthday also to Jake Weber, the English actor who we recall played Zara in the Discovery third season episodes Far From Home, There Is a Tide, and That Hope Is You, part 2, where we saw that character. So happy birthday to you, Jake Weber. And a big fave. I love my original series, folks. I just do. It's who I can't result. Whose birthday is actually today, on March 13th. It is the great Sean Kenny. Okay, who of course very memorably played several roles in Star Trek. I mean, I think the one that he gets the most props for is he was the person in the chair, with the scarring, disfigured original Captain Christopher Pike in those classic first season episodes, Menageries Part 1 and Part 2. Amazing work. I mean, it's haunting performance. He doesn't really move his face very much. Doesn't speak. But there's just something, he really did something with that performance that just became kind of iconic and incredibly haunting and memorable. So it's not an easy trick to pull off, but he captured something, and a tremendous incarnation of the performance, which we're seeing still echoing years later on Strange New Worlds with what Pike's dealing with. So fascinating stuff. But a prolific actor. Also had other turns in Star Trek as well, where he played a character in the first season called DePaul, who we saw in Arena, and also the classic episode A Taste of Armageddon. So you can see, I think he's a lieutenant, if I remember, Lieutenant DePaul, I believe he was. But yeah, he pops up in one of those characters, a lot of interesting recurring characters in the first season who didn't go on very far beyond that. So, but Sean Kinney's one of them, and pretty cool. And I would like to say an icon of season 1 original series. So we salute you, sir, and happy birthday today. I hope life is treating you well. And you certainly made quite an impact for Star Trek fans, young and old alike. That's what I've got on my list this week. I'm going to pass the flaming cake batleth to Uncle Jim.
Why, thank you so much, Paul. I always do the Klingons, and I always save them for last, and I have two this week. First, we want to say happy birthday and kapla to John Curry. And you're like, John Curry? Uncle Jim, who the hell is that? Well, I'm about to tell you. He voiced the character Maha on Star Trek Lower Decks. He appeared in 5 episodes. This guy was phenomenal. I would love to see a whole series of him and his brother selling blood wine in the Klingon Empire.
Yes, please.
It was that good. He appeared, the first time we see him is in an outstanding episode called Weej Dooj, which is phenomenal if you have not seen it. He also appeared in Tuvix, TWO, Tuvix, and The Inner Fight, A Farewell to Farms, and The New Next Generation. So if you want to see some of his excellent work as a Klingon, check out those episodes of Lower Decks. You won't be disappointed. Those episodes are amongst my favorites. So kapla, and happy birthday to John Curry. And last on my list is a character that we learned that they called the Lady in Red on Star Trek Picard Season 3. We want to say happy birthday to Trish O'Neill. And she's from Shreveport, Louisiana, and she's best known to Star Trek fans as Captain Rachel Garrett in the TNG 3rd season episode Yesterday's Enterprise. Yes, this is the same Rachel Garrett that we saw in Section 31 as Lieutenant Garrett. Different actress, same character. She also appeared as Coronos in DS9's 3rd season episode Defiant. There she is on the screen there as a Cardassian. But I am remembering her as a Klingon, as Kurak, in the 6th season episode of TNG called Suspicions. So kapla to Trisha O'Neill. And that wraps up our birthdays for this week. And now it's time to go into our Star Trek news.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Incoming transmission.
Enter authorization code. Command codes verified. Define parameters of program.
Level 9 authorization required.
Specify parameters.
Transfer of data is complete.
Blank alert. Blank alert.
Okay, Eric, you get to start us off, buddy. Take it away.
Ooh. All right. We are heading into one of our favorite sections here called Shatner Says What? And I think this plays off something we talked about the other day with the possible return of Captain Kirk. But this one is kind of on the opposite end of things. So William Shatner shares a brutally honest response to a Star Trek question. William Shatner has left Star Trek fans in hysterics with his brutally honest reaction to a question about the franchise. Shatner, 93, made his debut in Gene Roddenberry's mega successful sci-fi franchise in 1966, of course playing Captain James Kirk, and was ultimately killed off in the 1994 film Star Trek Generations. The actor has long been vocal about the reason behind the decision to kill off the character, and in response to being asked the question, he said, quote, "Why did you let them kill Kirk off in Generations?" He shared a GIF on social media depicting someone shooting a gun filled with dollars. Fans of Star Trek praised the actor for his openness in the comments section, with one responding, "He has a great sense of humor." Another adding, "I can appreciate this level of simple honesty." However, it's worth noting that Shatner is not alluding to the fact that he himself made money from the decision, but that the studio, as he was told by the producer, quote, "We're going to kill Kirk because we think that it will make more money at the box office." In fact, Shatner was left unimpressed with the impetus behind the idea, but he was told Kirk would be dying with or without his approval. Shatner previously said, "I didn't think I had any choice in the matter. Paramount has decided that the ceiling that they should reach in our box office has been reached, and that they thought by putting in the Next Generation cast that they would reach a higher box office. That decision has been made. It was either I was going to appear and die, or they were going to say he died. So I chose the more practical of the two." The film ended up making just $118 million. I would have done something else, Shatner said. It was all against me. I wish that there had been more trumpets for the death of the character. Oof. Well, not to worry, Mr. Shatner. Pretty sure you'll find a way to work your way back into it.
Bring him back.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Maybe in
All
a
right.
comic book.
Yeah, well,
Aw.
I mean, so I often bring this up on the podcast, but if you want to learn kind of the vision that Mr. Shatner had for his character post Generations, you should read, and I'm not saying it's a great book, but you could choose to read the book The Return, which was a Star Trek novel that he wrote, wherein he is brought back by various technological mechanisms and shenanigans ensue. So there you go.
That sounds great.
Did
I
they
can't
clone
wait.
him?
I read it. Eh.
Well, Paul gets our next story as our resident award person. So
Okay, I do kind of get swept up in award fever every year because, movie addict that I am. And I'm here to tell you that Zoe Saldana has swept the award season as she wins Best Supporting Actress at the 2025 Oscars for her work in Emilia Perez. Okay, from center stage to the golden stage, Zoe Saldana's talent is undeniable. The star took home her first Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for her role in Emilia Perez at the 2025 Academy Awards. She says, "My mom is here. My whole family is here. I am floored by this honor," Saldana said through tears while accepting her award. "To my cast and my crew of Emilia Perez, I'm sharing this award with you." She also added that to my mom and my dad and sisters, everything brave, outrageous, and good I've ever done in my life is because of you. Giving her other half, Marco Perego, whom she married in 2013, a shout out, Saldana continued, "And to my husband, the biggest honor in my life is being your partner. My grandmother came to this country in 1961. I am a proud child of immigrant parents with dreams and dignity and hardworking hands. I am the first American of Dominican origin to accept an Academy Award, and I know I won't be the last." It was a very impassioned speech. Really, really well done. The accolades come after Saldana swept awards season for her role, taking home the Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, BAFTA, and Screen Actors Guild awards for playing lawyer Rita Mora Castro. At age 21, Saldana put on her point shoes as she landed her first feature film role in the 2000 dance musical Center Stage as ballet dancer Eva Rodriguez. Saldana then starred opposite Britney Spears and Taryn Manning in the 2002 rom-com Crossroads. She starred in the 2005 flick Guess Who opposite Ashton Kutcher and Bernie Mac. Saldana played a young woman who brings home her new fiancé, Kutcher, to meet her parents. I'm not sure why that's there. Fascinating description of that memorable movie. By 2009, she joined James Cameron's Avatar franchise, playing the role of Neytiri, and wow, did that ever take off? After playing the character in 2022's Avatar: The Way of Water, Zoe Saldana is set to reprise her role in the fictitious land of Pandora in Avatar: Fire and Ash, scheduled for release this coming December, friends. She's also starred as Lieutenant Nyota Uhura in Star Trek 2009, followed by Star Trek Into Darkness in 2013 and Star Trek Beyond in 2016. As for the possibility of a fourth Star Trek film, Zoe Saldana said, "I still have hope," calling the first three projects a wonderful experience. She added, "I know they're always trying to sort of aim to wrangle everybody together, but I also know that Paramount is working on a new sort of fresh take on Star Trek, which I think is such a wonderful franchise that should live for a very long time. Whether or not us as the original remake cast can come back, I don't know, but I certainly hope so." In 2014, she took on the character of Gamora in Guardians of the Galaxy before reprising the green-skinned warrior princess 4 more times in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. In 2023, Saldana began playing CIA officer in the Paramount Plus spy series Special Ops Lioness alongside Nicole Kidman. Fast forward to 2024 and the Netflix musical thriller Emilia Perez. Emilia Perez follows a Mexican drug cartel leader played by Carla Sofia Gascon, who transitions to a woman. I am proud to be part of a union that allows me to be who I am. I have never been questioned where I come from, or judged for how I speak, or what my pronouns are, Saldana continued. Everyone has the right to be who they are. Emilia Perez is about truth and love, and us actors really have to tell stories that are thought-provoking and beautiful and live within the spectrum of artistic freedom. And I just feel compelled to just say briefly, this movie got a lot of grief, right? I had a really good shot of, I think, taking home Best Picture. I mean, it could have. It really, really could have. It's a dynamite picture. It reinvents the musical in a very fresh and compelling and potent way. I think two things happened. The fact that a trans character is prominently featured in this film, not as you would ever imagine, right? Defying all stereotypes. And the fact that that character is played by a trans actor, Carla Sofia Gascon, who said a lot of things that perhaps their press agent wished they hadn't on social media, as sometimes you get caught up in the moment, right? And it really caused a lot of controversy that I think unfairly blemished the film, right? It is a terrific picture. The main reason I want to point out is okay, yeah, Zoe Saldana won Best Supporting Actress. It's one of those weird things, though, right? Best Supporting Actress, but she's in like every scene in this movie.
Mm.
It's weird. It's like when Samuel L. Jackson got Best Supporting Actor for Pulp Fiction. I'm like, he's in every scene in the movie, right? I mean, what you talking about? But she is phenomenal. I've always been a big fan of Zoe Saldana's, in all of her work. I mean, she's such a sci-fi girl, right? I mean, Avatar, Guardians, but I don't know that she's ever been better than she has been in this, okay? Don't let the fact that there are elements of sexuality that you're not comfortable with put you off this film. I don't like musicals. Don't be that guy, okay?
No, and
Watch,
don't look at the IMDb score either,
yeah,
because that's
whatever
some
you do,
bullshit right
it's
there.
bot-generated nonsense that, a bunch of, troglodytes artificially conflate. But this movie's a 10, and it's really rewarding. I remember talking after it was over. I'm like, there was never like a scene that I was not enraptured by and totally on the edge of my seat. There's no dull spot, right? There's no safe bathroom scene in Emilia Perez. It's just great. It's a dynamite, highly underrated, and I'm sorry it got so much controversy thrown at it, but I think history will be really kind to this movie. It's a knockout. First and foremost, it's a crime picture, right? It is a pretty in-your-face crime picture at a lot of times. If you like, movies about villains and about crime and facing up against challenging odds, the movie delivers like a house on fire. So definitely check it out, friends, if you have not. Congratulations, Zoe Saldana. We'd love it if you come back as Uhura again, because you rock. And I'm going to pass it over to Charles.
Okay,
Turn my
Charles.
mic back on.
Charles,
Turn my.
Yep, there we go.
Okay.
he's in Tholian space.
Yeah, I had to transfer studios. A new Captain Janeway spinoff is being pursued. Star Trek Star Trek Janeway, a series focused on the return of Kate Mulgrew as Admiral Catherine Janeway, set sometime after the events of Prodigy and after the events of Picard Season 3. Speaking to a crowd of fans during the official Star Trek cruise, McGrew answered a question about the possibility of a Janeway-focused spin-off series, or failing that, her return to the franchise in any capacity. There's a conversation happening, McGrew said. It is being pursued. McGrew has long been vocal about galvanizing fans, which particular results in Star Trek Prodigy Season 2 ending up on Netflix. But in terms of a new Star Trek series focusing on the post-Voyage era, nothing on the current Paramount Plus slate fits that description. On Star Trek Clues, McGrew expressed concern that Janeway's live-action series might not live up to what fans wanted, and she also didn't want to do a show that Vandy projects. It seems that although fans would prefer a live-action Janeway series, McGrew's preference, and perhaps what she's pursuing, would be to simply get a third season of Star Trek Prodigy. In both seasons of that series, McGrew played not only an older Admiral Janeway, but a holographic AI interface, Hologram Janeway, who guided the young stalwart on the USS Protostar. I'd like Prodigy to be optimized for a third season, McGrew said in a pre-taped interview ahead of the cruise. So if Janeway doesn't return, it seems it would be McGrew's preference, at least for now. There's still a lot of love out there for Voyage era, and clearly all of it's a buzz and could indicate that McGrew's final appearance in Star Trek mythos wouldn't be limited to Prodigy Season 2. But where she'd beam in again, demanding black coffee, remains unseen. A hypothetical Prodigy Season 3 would be the easiest way for Janeway to turn, but not the only way.
No, I think that since the holographic Doctor is coming back, we could see holodeck Janeway in Starfleet Academy very easily, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see her current day version of herself, and not kind of like an older version, like a previous version, because I feel like when you see Kate Mulgrew the way she looks now, it just kind of lends even more weight to the fact that Janeway would have all this experience and, knowledge, and just like, I feel like you would feel the gravity of her character even more if you saw her in her current day incarnation. I love that she was on Prodigy as kind of a younger holographic version of herself, but I would love to see her in the flesh with the hair, playing the person that she is now.
Did you watch her in Orange is the New Black, man?
Oh,
Absolutely.
I mean,
amazing.
just what chops, man.
Yeah.
Just like to show, I'm gonna do something totally different, and just like off she goes. But you just buy everything she sells, man.
She
Every
played
single thing.
Red, right? It was Red.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's just super hardcore. I think that after it just shows what a kind of, I mean, really compelling but narrow area of focus that she did with Janeway, right? And she can just do all this other stuff. I'm with you, man. I'd like to see like a later days Janeway who's still got a lot of fire in her belly, right? And wants to deal with stuff, right?
I mean, I think Janeway could be for lack of a better term, the new Picard, right? The one who's always like making the right decisions, has all the knowledge, takes all the things into consideration. I just think she would be fantastic in that role.
And John Rice Davies is still with us, so we can still do like Leonardo
absolutely
moments of like. I mean, it still could be.
Playing with that,
I mean,
yeah. That'd be amazing.
And God, let's get Tuvok and them back together, right?
Thank you.
Mean, it would be the best. That guy's just amazing.
Yeah, Tim Russ was amazing on this podcast. He was so cool.
so freaking cool. But yeah, I mean, I think that she's right. What does she say? That there is a huge amount of love for Voyager, right? I think it's way more popular now than it was when it was on the air. I think people have really discovered, the quality of the writing and the characters, and I'd be way down for that.
All right, guys. Well, you know what time it is?
No.
Yep. It's that time again. So so next week we're going to be doing a great performances of Star Trek podcast. We're each going to pick some of our favorite moments from some of our favorite characters, and just chat about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have our Star Trek polls again and our Star Trek birthdays, and hopefully we'll have more living birthdays than we have remembrances, which was odd this week, but you never know. And I want to take a moment to say thank you to Eric for hanging out and Trek talking with us tonight. Thank you so much, Eric.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
And thank you so much to Paul for hanging out and Trek talking with us. Thank you, Paul.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Lots of fun.
And of course, thank you to Charles, even with his palm trees and scorpions, for Trek talking with us. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much,
thank
Charles.
you. Just got to be careful of the storms. You guys in
And be careful where you
Portland,
walk.
batten down too.
And thank you to David, our miracle worker, for the wonderful slideshows and for hanging out and Trek talking with us. Thank you so much, David.
Yes, you're welcome. It's been really fun. I enjoyed it.
And I'm your most excellent host, Uncle Jim, saying to everybody, please stay safe and be good to each other. Remember, Star Trek fans are the best fans. Thank you for being a fan. Hailing frequencies are closed. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Live long
Night,
and
y'all.
prosper.
Keep your powder dry.
All stations ready for departure, sir. Some problem, Riker?
Just hoping this isn't the usual way our missions will go, sir.
Oh, no, number one. I'm sure most will be much more interesting. Let's see what's out there. Engage.